She didn't check his name. She didn't check the manifest. She just saw a black man in 2A and tried to make him disappear. That mistake would cost her everything. It was 6:24 a.m. when Ibrahim Traoré stepped quietly into Terminal 2E of Charles de Gaulle Airport. Fog pressed against the tall glass panes, and the hum of travelers rolled through the air like white noise. His gray canvas backpack hung lightly over one shoulder. No security escort, no aides, no flags. Just a man in a faded coat and well-worn sneakers, moving with quiet purpose toward Gate M47. He didn't draw attention, and that was the point. Ibrahim wasn't just returning home from a diplomatic summit. He was running a personal audit, unannounced, unseen, and unsparing. 2 days earlier, his office received yet another dossier of reports: discriminatory boarding practices, dismissive behavior toward African passengers, deliberate downgrades masked as seat balancing, all traced back to a handful of international carriers. One name kept surfacing, so he booked a flight under a generic alias, MD Arnold, paid in cash. No VIP alert, no diplomatic code, just one man in 2A. He had crafted the mission carefully. Even his secretary, Kiana Brooks, would be sitting several rows back in economy, quietly monitoring. Her only instruction? Don't interfere, unless it becomes dangerous. Ibrahim chose not to test people with power. He wanted to watch what they did when they thought no one important was watching. As he sat near the window at the boarding gate, scrolling through his notes from the African Union EU Gold Sustainability Summit in Brussels, no one looked his way. An older businessman brushed past and muttered something in French under his breath. A family seated across the gate stared for a second too long, then turned away. It didn't bother Ibrahim. He'd seen this dance before, the calculated indifference, the way the world blurred past people who looked like him. But this morning wasn't about ego. It was about truth. The flight to Borona Republic was just under 6 hours. A small route, mostly filled with European executives, mining contractors, and NGO consultants, people who made a living in Africa, but rarely imagined Africa having a voice of its own. In row 2A, Ibrahim settled into the business class cabin. The boarding was smooth, polite, efficient. He kept his voice low, his posture relaxed. A steward offered coffee. He declined. He had no intention of drawing attention. That changed when Douglas Reinhardt walked in. Late, loud, flat, CEO of Reinhardt Global Energy, a corporate entity operating in 17 countries across the African continent, including a recently failed bid to secure a 25-year gas contract in Ibrahim's own nation. The irony wasn't lost on him. Reinhardt's tailored blue suit was immaculate. His leather duffel bore his initials in gold. When told that business class was fully booked, he didn't flinch. He barked into his phone. "I'm a strategic partner of the Borona Republic. Who decided this seating nonsense?" The ground staff made calls. Emails were forwarded. Internal whispers followed. At gate M47, a quiet command passed to the head crew on board. Reallocate if possible, discreetly. And that was when Lucienne Blake entered. Lucienne was a force, broad-shouldered, tightly wound, and unapologetically old school. Her red lipstick was as sharp as her tone, and her years in international flight had shaped her into someone who knew how to read passengers instantly. Or so she believed. As she boarded, manifest in hand, she didn't ask questions. She didn't scan the list twice. Her eyes drifted over to 2A, and that was enough. He looked. Unimportant. She didn't check the name, didn't verify his status. She just saw a black man in a plain coat sitting quietly in a seat she now needed to open. So she made her move. Lucienne Blake adjusted the collar of her uniform, stepped into business class, and scanned the cabin like she was on patrol. Her heels hit the carpet with authority. She didn't pause at the galley. didn't make eye contact with the attendants. Her eyes landed where she expected trouble. 2A. There he was, the same man she had noticed during boarding, still in that dull gray coat, still reading something quietly on his phone, still not looking like someone who belonged there. She didn't need confirmation. Her gut told her everything. She stepped up to Ibrahim's seat and spoke without introduction. "Sir, due to a last-minute aircraft balance issue, we need to make some quick seating adjustments. Would you mind relocating to economy?" Ibrahim looked up, calm, eyes clear. "No problem," he said softly. "Could you confirm the change with my ticket?" He reached inside his coat and handed it to her. Lucienne barely glanced. Seat 2A, Business Elite, red tag priority, no errors. Still, she didn't move. Instead, she handed it back with a tight nod and said, "I'll see what we can do." But her eyes betrayed her. Not curiosity, not confusion, just contempt. She turned and walked away. And her mission wasn't over. Behind her, 2 rows back, a young black nurse leaned toward her seatmate and whispered, "They have no idea who he is." Her friend glanced over. "He looks ordinary," she murmured, "but he carries himself like someone they shouldn't touch." Lucienne didn't hear it. She was too busy reviewing the manifest again. Not to find names, just to find passengers who, like Ibrahim, wouldn't cause a fuss. Men who looked like they were used to being told what to do. Passengers in suits stayed. Passengers with pale skin stayed. She began checking for anyone she could reassign. One by one, she tapped shoulders. A law student at 3 a.m. black, early 20 cents, was invited to help balance the cabin. No explanation. No smile. Just that firm Lucienne tone, like it wasn't a request. In 4C, a quiet woman with dark curls and an accent she didn't try to hide was also asked to relocate. By the third adjustment, murmurs began to swirl. People noticed. But no one spoke up, except their phones. Several passengers had begun recording discreetly. TikTok was already watching. And Lucienne, either unaware or uncaring, made her final stop, back to Ibrahim. She didn't speak this time, just stood there, eyes set on him like a silent command. He looked up again, still calm, still composed. Then he stood, not in protest, not in submission, just stood and held her gaze. It was the kind of silence that fills a courtroom before a verdict. Not a sound in the cabin moved. Even the flight attendants near the galley paused. Lucienne didn't blink, but she felt it, that tight, unsettling pressure crawling up her spine. Then Ibrahim spoke, soft but surgical. To judge someone by appearance is to declare your own ignorance with pride. Lucienne's lip twitched. Her professional smile was unraveling thread by thread. "I just followed protocol," she snapped. "Then your protocol needs correcting," he said. She stepped back, but not because he was threatening, because she was exposed. Ibrahim returned to his seat without fanfare. No raised voice, no grandstanding. Just a man reclaiming a place he had already earned. A few rows back, an older man lowered his espresso with trembling fingers. A woman stopped chewing mid-bite. The cabin wasn't sure what they'd just witnessed, but they knew it was something. Douglas Reinhardt entered shortly after. Lucienne straightened like a soldier on review. The change in her tone was instant. "Mr. Reinhardt," she beamed, "your seat is ready. We've made special accommodations." He barely looked at her. His eyes landed on Ibrahim for a second too long. Elle moved on. He sat in 2B, smug, composed, his napkin laid out, a flute of sparkling wine set before him. Lucienne returned to the galley. Her hands shook. She checked her email. An internal message blinked unread. Reconfirm 2A status. Possible high-level clearance. She didn't open it. Didn't want to. She'd already made up her mind. 30 minutes into the flight, the energy in the cabin had shifted. No one said it out loud, but the air felt heavier. Charged. Kiana Brooks, seated quietly back in row 17C, adjusted her glasses and opened the Secure app on her phone. She typed a short message. Secondary pattern confirmed. Proceeding to protocol alert. She didn't look toward 2A. Didn't need to. Meanwhile, Lucienne stood at the curtain separating business and economy, scanning the rows again. Her eyes flicked across the black passengers she had reassigned. A young woman in a yellow sweater sat at the far end of economy, arms crossed tightly across her chest, avoiding eye contact. A middle-aged professor had tucked himself near the window, reading without focus. Lucienne didn't say a word to them now. She had done what she needed to do, and yet something felt off. She returned to the galley. Her junior attendant, Kevin, stood there, his eyes wide. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," she replied, too fast. But Kevin didn't move. He leaned in and whispered, "Lucienne, there's a passenger filming, back row. It's going viral." "What?" she hissed. Kevin shrugged helplessly. "I saw it trending on my break." He sat in 2A. Almost 50,000 views in 15 minutes? Lucienne's jaw tightened. Back in business class, Douglas Reinhardt leaned toward Ibrahim with that lazy arrogance only certain men could master. "You flying in for business or tourism?" he asked, voice lined with polite mockery. Ibrahim didn't look up from his book. "Returning home," he replied. "Nice. Always good to visit the motherland," Reinhardt said, swirling his wine glass. "I hear Barona's got some interesting reforms these days?" Ibrahim looked at him then. Not unkindly, but deeply. Like someone peering through layers. "You've been trying to do business in Barona, haven't you?" he asked. Reinhardt blinked. "Long story. Complicated politics. Your presidents made things difficult." Ibrahim nodded once. "Maybe he values dignity over deals." Reinhardt chuckled. "Let's see how long that lasts in a global market." From behind, someone coughed awkwardly. Silence followed. Lucienne re-entered the cabin, stopping at 2A again, her hands shaking slightly. She was holding a fresh manifest. Updated. Bold-faced. She didn't want to look at it, but she had to. Passenger, Ibrahim Traoré. Designation, diplomatic priority, executive class. Country, Republic of Barona. Rank, head of state. Lucienne's mouth went dry. She stepped back so suddenly she bumped the cart. Kevin caught it before it toppled. "What is it?" he whispered. Lucienne didn't answer. She moved toward the rear of the cabin. She needed air. She needed time. She didn't have either. As she passed row 5, a teenage girl whispered to her mom, "Mom, that's the guy on TikTok, the one they're talking about." Lucienne stopped walking. Someone else near the exit muttered, "That's why you never assume." A ripple of discomfort flowed through the aisle. Meanwhile, down in row 17, Kiana had already sent the final signal. A secure diplomatic message, coded and routed through the embassy relay line. She didn't speak. Didn't shift. She simply tapped send and slipped the phone into her coat pocket. In the cockpit, the pilot received an encrypted comm update. VIP confirmed on board. Initiate head of state arrival protocol, runway 4C. Back in business class, Ibrahim closed his book, adjusted his coat, and glanced once more out the window. Clouds drifted below. The sun glinted off the wing. In 2B, Reinhardt checked his watch. "You ever feel like something's about to happen?" he said casually. Ibrahim didn't respond. He didn't need to. The wheels touched down at precisely 9:02 IME. Flight 612 from Paris to Borona Republic rolled gently onto the runway. But something was off. From the cabin windows, passengers began to notice the unusual activity outside. A long line of black SUVs stretched along the tarmac. Soldiers in formal dress uniform flanked the arrival gate. A national flag whipped in the morning wind, bold crimson and gold. Whispers rose across business class. Are they expecting a head of state? Lucienne stood frozen near the galley. Her clipboard trembled slightly in her hand. Douglas Reinhardt adjusted his tie and leaned toward her, whispering with a smirk. Well, it looks like they're here for me. She tried to laugh, but it came out stiff, hollow. In 2A, Ibrahim sat motionless, still in his faded coat, still watching the clouds drift across the distant hills. The plane taxied, slowed, and came to a complete stop. Then the cabin lights flicked. The moment the seatbelt sign clicked off, a flight attendant started the usual script. But she was cut off. The aircraft door opened, and a man stepped in. Not just any man. Colonel Grant Westmore, commander of the Presidential Guard. He didn't look around, didn't ask questions. He walked straight down the business aisle with the force of silence behind him. All eyes turned. Booms lifted. Lucienne stepped aside, her mouth slightly open. Colonel Westmore stopped at 2A, saluted crisply, and said in a voice that filled every inch of the aircraft, "Mr. President, welcome home." Gasps. No sound but them. A wine glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the armrest. Reinhardt flinched. Lucienne dropped her manifest. It slapped the floor like a verdict. Ibrahim rose slowly. No words, no smile. He buttoned the top of his coat, then nodded. The entire business class cabin bowed. Not because they were told, not because they understood, but because power, real power, doesn't yell. It doesn't announce itself. It sits in silence and waits. Ibrahim stepped forward, his stride unhurried as more soldiers appeared at the cabin door. The Presidential Guard moved as one, shielding him from cameras as they guided him down the stairs. Lucienne still hadn't moved. Reinhardt tried to stand, tried to follow, but one soldier raised a hand. Not hostile. Just final. "Please remain seated, sir." Outside, the flag of Borona waved as a black car door opened. The driver didn't speak. He simply saluted. But the storm wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Within minutes of touchdown, video clips flooded social media. A salute. A bow. Lucienne's frozen face. Reinhardt's open mouth. The hashtag ignited like wildfire. He sat in too. On Twitter, one post went viral in under 7 minutes. She told him to move. The world told her to sit down. But nothing hit harder than the leak. Someone, likely from the cabin crew, had screenshotted Lucienne's internal message, sent just an hour earlier. It read, 2A occupied by unverified male. Does not appear to meet business class profile. Recommend quiet reassign to accommodate VIP. Attached, a blurry image of Ibrahim seated quietly. Underneath. No visible credentials. Gray coat. The internet didn't take it lightly. By the time Ibrahim reached the convoy, news anchors were already picking up the story. This morning, the president of the Borona Republic returned from Europe, disrespected, unrecognized, and nearly displaced aboard Flight 612. Sources confirm the incident will be reviewed by the country's aviation board. From her phone, Kiona Brooks watched the clips as they spread, then tucked the device back into her blazer. She said nothing, but the world was now very loud. Inside the aircraft, silence hung like smoke. Lucienne still hadn't moved from the galley door. Her lipstick had faded, Her posture collapsed into something no longer commanding, just A ping hit her tablet. Another. Then dozens. Notifications flooding in. Internal dispatches, news alerts, comments, tags. One from her own airline's corporate hub read simply, "Urgent. Do not engage further. Investigation pending. Media response in 30 minutes." He didn't open any of them. Behind her, a teenaged girl softly whispered to her mother. She tried to move a president like he was baggage. In the front row, Reinhardt sat pale, scrolling through his phone in disbelief. His inbox was already lit up. Press inquiries, government silence. The pipeline deal he had pushed for the last 9 months on life support. And then it got worse. A new video dropped. Not from the flight, from 2 months ago. A security camera time-stamped at the Verona embassy in Brussels. Ibrahim walking in, greeted by EU dignitaries, standing beside world leaders, signing the Verona Gold Stability Pact. With the caption, they called him unverified. Here's the verification. By the hour's end, the footage was clipped, stitched, and repackaged across every social platform. Another trending caption took over. Bill didn't raise his voice, but he made the world bow. By noon, Lucien's name was trending at 4 globally. Comments flooded every airline post. Release a real apology. Retrain your staff. She saw a black man. The rest of us saw a leader. Check the manifest next time. But the part that sent it over the edge wasn't the bow or the salute or even the video leak. It was the badge. Hours later, after the plane had emptied, a cleaning crew found it. Left behind. Resting quietly on the tray table of seat 2A. A polished brass pin, small, discreet. It bore the seal of the AU-EU summit, and engraved beneath it, in English and French, equal dignity, shared future. The image of that badge, posted by a cleaning supervisor named Alani, exploded online. She wrote, "He's left this behind. I think he wanted the message to stay." Lucien, now grounded pending investigation, sat alone in a corporate holding room. No lawyers, no press. Just her, the manifest, still in her lap. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had flown thousands of hours, but somehow never really seen. Douglas Reinhardt fared no better. A press release from Verona's Minister of Energy appeared late that evening. Reinhardt Global Energy's bid for regional contracts will be suspended indefinitely, pending ethical review. Translation: they were done. At the presidential palace, Ibrahim met with cabinet ministers behind closed doors. No press conference, no interviews, no grandstanding. Just quiet leadership. At 8:12 p.m., his office released a single statement. No personnel will be publicly condemned, but those involved must now ask themselves one question. What did you see when you looked at me? And why did that matter more than the truth? The comment section ignited with applause. A civil rights activist wrote, "Lines should be carved into every HR handbook in the world." Another reposted the video of Ibrahim rising from 2A, writing, "Dignity doesn't demand. It simply exists. And eventually, it gets noticed." By the following morning, the ripple had turned into a wave. Not of rage, but awakening. Major news outlets across continents ran the story, not as scandal, but as mirror. A reflection of what happens when power looks different than expected. When dignity doesn't dress the way privilege thinks it should. The badge Ibrahim left behind became a symbol. Activists printed it on T-shirts. Schools quoted it in assemblies. Corporate boards added equal dignity as a case study in unconscious bias training. But Ibrahim didn't speak. Not for days. Not until the honor summit at Oaga University, an event meant to celebrate education reform, not address political controversy. Still, when he stepped on stage, every seat was filled. The room was silent. He didn't bring security. He brought a single folder. He walked to the podium, adjusted the mic, and looked at the students before him. "Some of you already know what happened last week," he began. "A woman judged me, a man disrespected me, a system failed me." He paused, but I wasn't angry. I wasn't surprised, because I know how often people like me are told, "We don't belong." A hush blanketed the room. "But the truth is, I wasn't the one they disrespected," he continued. "They disrespected your future. They disrespected the idea that leadership can wear a hoodie, that power can sit quietly, that the man in 2A might change your world, not because he demanded to, but because he listened first." The students began to clap, soft at first, then louder, then on their feet. But Ibrahim wasn't done. He opened his folder, held up a printout. It was a still frame, Lucien's message, the one she sent before she knew. "She called me unverified," he said, "but I don't need to verify my worth. And neither do you." He folded the paper, set it aside. "Don't waste your energy proving you belong. Just sit. Stay seated, and when they ask why you're here, tell them, because I am, because I see, because I build, because I matter." A thunder of applause erupted. But what came next was even more unexpected. The airline released a full video apology. Not just a statement, but a short film narrated by one of their own crew members. It acknowledged bias, named names, shared what they were doing to change. Lucien's face was not in it, but her absence said enough. Douglas Reinhardt, under pressure from his own board, resigned within a week. In his statement, he wrote, "I failed to recognize the seat I sat next to. Wasn't empty. It held the weight of a nation I didn't respect enough to learn from. That mistake cost me more than money." And yet, Ibrahim never called for either of them to be fired. When asked why, he said only this: "If humiliation teaches faster than compassion, let the silence do its work." By the end of the month, international flight protocols were updated. A clause was added under VIP handling. No reassignment decisions shall be made based on appearance alone. It was unofficially dubbed the 2A rule. Weeks passed. The world kept flying, but something in the air had changed. Passengers now glanced twice, not at who was seated where, but at how they were treated. Training videos were rewritten. Airline executives sat through roundtables titled, "What Does 2A Mean to You?" And in university halls, students still quoted Ibrahim's line, "Don't waste your energy proving you belong. Just sit." But not every change was corporate. Some came from places no one expected. Like a single Reddit thread titled, "I was on flight 612. I saw it all, and I was silent." It was posted by a young man seated in 2C. He recounted the looks, the whispers, his own fear of speaking up. But the last line stopped people cold. "It didn't make me feel small. I did that all by myself. But watching him stand quietly while the world turned made me want to be better. So, this is my beginning." Thousands of comments followed. From flight attendants, from former passengers, from strangers who saw themselves in both Lucien and Ibrahim. But the story didn't end with hashtags. It ended in a classroom. Months later, at a small school in the north of Verona, a teacher told her students about the man who sat in 2A, about the way he held his ground without raising his hand, about how respect isn't granted by fabric, accent, or wealth. A young girl raised her hand. How do you know it's true? The teacher smiled and opened a drawer. Inside, sealed in a glass box, was a replica pin, modeled after the one Ibrahim left behind. She placed it gently on the table and read the words aloud. Equal dignity, shared future. Outside, a mural had appeared. Painted by students, local artists, and activists, it showed a silhouette in a faded coat, seated alone, while an entire plane of passengers bowed around him. One phrase stretched across the top in bold white paint. We saw. And below it, a single question. What would you do if you were on that flight? Because in the end, the story wasn't about punishment. It was about reflection, about the man who never had to raise his voice to shake the world. The man who didn't just fly home. He made everyone look up.